Okay. All right. So, welcome to everyone to our learning series for today. We are so honored to have a special guest with us today. Dr. Bryan Boulanger works at the intersection of education, engineering, and conservation, leading efforts that connect stakeholders with nature, protect ecological systems and cultural heritage, and explore innovative solutions for a more sustainable future. He currently serves as the Engineering Centennial Alumni Endowed Chair for the Cocosine Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering at the Northern University, and is a member of IUCN's World Commission on Protected Areas. Bryan is a past recipient of the U.S.'s EPA's Mission Award, a past U.S. National Academy of Science Research Council Associate, and a past Dark Sky International's Nocturnal Habitat Protection Awardee. Since 2015, Bryan has focused on developing tools and practices that decision makers can use to reduce the impact of artificial lightscapes on surrounding nocturnal ecosystems, natural resources, and human experiences. His contributions and knowledge have been used to improve natural nightscapes and managed landscapes and communities throughout the world. He has been very helpful to start us off at Dark Sky, Ohio. He is still our official, lighting expert. So we're so glad to have him on today. So, Bryan, take it away.
All right, thank you, Tracy. That introduction made me feel a little bit older, so appreciate that too. Um, Today, I'm going to talk about managing artificial lightscapes, and I'll try to keep my comments mostly Ohio focused, but the breadth goes far beyond Ohio, far beyond the US at this point. But before I start, okay, let's see. I want to do my own set of thank yous and acknowledgments because the work that I'll talk about is really the culmination of many people's efforts far beyond myself. I want to start by thanking the members of Dark Sky Ohio, Tracy for setting this up and for her friendship over the years. Terry Mann was also one of the original founders. I'm not sure if she's on here this morning. Brian Sumner's been on since the beginning. So, hey, Brian. And then newer people like Aaron as well that we've had a little bit longer of a relationship with. So I appreciate all the effort and energy, especially over the past year since I sort of mostly stepped out of the leadership role in the group, and just watch it take off is really nice to see. I'd be remiss if I don't thank Ohio Northern University. We're a small engineering college in Northwest Ohio. We're in Ada. For those of you who are in the area, feel free to stop by anytime. On engineering, we're undergrad focused. And within civil, we have about 150 of your next civil engineers coming out, and sometime in the future here. We surrounded by great colleagues who all are supportive of the work that I do. The National Park Service, particularly the Natural Sounds and Night Skies Division, I've had a long-term relationship with them. John Barentine, who's a name many of you might have heard of before. He was previously with IDA when they were IDA. Today, they're Dark Sky International, and the staff there, including Ruskin, Betty Mai, and a few others, they've been long-term friends and colleagues. So thank you to all of them. And finally, my family. As I've traveled around the globe, I usually have a family member with me. Usually my kids have, five of them now have served as field techs for the work that I do, and my wife has gotten to go to some nice places as well with me. So that's going to be sort of the background for the work that I'll talk about. And really the motivation for the work came in 2007. I was out in the Guadalupe Mountains observing a night sky that I hadn't seen for a long time, not since I was a kid and when we traveled out west. And when I was camping there that night in October, I realized sort of two things. The first was it's really unfortunate that I can't see this where I live because of all the civil engineering infrastructure that we've built. And at the time, I was a faculty member in engineering. And I thought, well, maybe there's something that I can do about that for the next generation so that we'll still have places to protect in the future. I like this picture in particular because it shows to me what a visual of the night sky looks like normally, right? Under really pristine conditions, this is what you can expect to see. It's not as artistic as some of the other images that you've seen out there, but to me, it's a visual reminder of what could be. And this was the night sky and the naturally dark surroundings that we had all across our country um, for certainly 100 years ago. And since then, a lot's changed. Most of you have probably seen this image by Cinzano, Falci et al., and it shows what the modeling looks like for changes in visual light from above over time. So in the 50s, when my parents were born, they had a very different night sky, and my grandparents before them and great grandparents would have seen, even in this part of Ohio or New England where I grew up, they would have seen a night sky that looks like the Guadalupes today. But because of all the development, we're quickly moving away from pre-1950s into what we see today. And while this is a model, it's perhaps not surprising because science is pretty easy in this, but what it looks like today from satellite images is almost dead on. And we're growing light spread anywhere between 1 to 3% per year globally, and that has some consequences. And when I got involved, I was mostly because I like to spend a lot of time outside. Um, but for our astronomy friends who really led the movement starting in the 80s, it was really they learned that their ability to do ground-based visual observations was, or even scientific observations was going away. And so you had beautiful observatories built that could no longer necessarily fulfill all of their mission. And they started pushing back against the sort of status quo of what development looks like. Um, I like astronomy, but I wasn't, that wasn't my driver. And perhaps that's not necessarily entirely your driver as well. There are many other reasons why having a natural dark environment is important to us and to the ecosystem. And so there's a list there on the left. Um, my driver was really the wilderness landscape. I was very fortunate to spend a lot of time in places like Yellowstone, which is shown on the right, and have some great backcountry experiences where, connecting as a young kid with the night sky, the naturally dark environment was positive. Um, I work a lot with the Park Service, who cares about the human experience as well. What is it like to be the visitor in the type of environment? Half the park is after dark is probably one of their best advertising logos in that century. But for most federal land managers, they're interested also in the energy usage. The federal government owns a lot of buildings across our nation, and in such, they want to be able to limit their footprint overall moving forward. And that's true of Ohio as well. As we're looking to, there's several rest stops and rest areas along the way, and they're changing a lot of the lighting out. They're changing the building design out, and you could tell one of the goals is energy. And as a effect, they're not necessarily using as much lighting as they have been in the past. So whatever your driver is, thanks for being an advocate and for getting involved and for learning more. As an engineer, once I put two and two together, I was just annoyed by the bad design of lighting. So much of what's out there is simply just bad design. And Dark Sky International has a lot of nice graphics that you can use to raise awareness and sort of tell this story. And this is one of those. On the left-hand side, we have an acorn fixture that's present it's ubiquitous in Ohio and really everywhere else. Some might say it has historical charm, but the fact of the matter, there's a lot of wasted light there. Anytime that you're lighting upwards as opposed to down directionally for task-oriented purposes, you're wasting the energy and causing glare and having an impact on surrounding ecological services. Just through different design, we can have lighting that performs all the tasks that we want, but in a much more effective manner. And so that's sort of the unacceptable to bad to better to best. And I'll talk a little bit more about the details of what that looks like and how it's implemented in practice. But just keep this in your mind as a resource that people can use. I think one of the most successful programs that Dark Sky International currently runs is the Dark Sky Places program. And I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about what elements the program has and sort of how they work together in order to bring people into naturally dark environments for stargazing or for thinking about nocturnal habitat or for discussing what proper lighting design looks like. And the Dark Sky Places program currently has 5 different categories ranging from community to sanctuary. And we'll talk about each one of those just a little bit. So in terms of getting involved, I think one of the elements of my work that a lot of my colleagues talk to me about is like, okay, you're doing all this work out, far west or in remote parts of the world to preserve night sky, but how about the night skies in places where we live, like Ohio? And Dark Sky International knows that, all throughout Ohio, we really have challenges with regional light pollution. The, what I can do on my property to limit my own lighting footprint is important. And when I go to Ada, I can work with a small town. And then as we spread out across the state, the light that I see in my night sky is not necessarily nearby. Um, so they've recognized that by beginning to scaffold. And so they have several prerequisites that all of the categories have to fulfill, and that's a public commitment, a lighting plan, thinking about what your lighting has to look like in the future. Just because it looks like it does today doesn't mean it has to stay that way. One of the ways they begin to retrofit lighting is through inventories, and there's a lot of education outreach, which was where I'm guessing, a lot of people on this call live. How do we tell the story of why protecting the natural dark environment, the night sky, is important? And then other successes that you can point to. And finally, who they are is part of the story, so they want you to help tell that story. But in Ohio, we have Dark Sky Park, which is observatory park. That park came in under older guidelines and was based upon not necessarily setting established night sky quality parameters. Today it would be harder to get a dark sky park in Ohio because of that regional light pollution, but we can move through communities and we can move through urban places which have different designations. And Fry Family Park is also a dark sky park too. I'm not sure if I'm missing any others, Tracy. But as we go through, just keep in mind that the night sky quality is one of the governing factors for which category you can come into. So if you're using the Bortle index over on the right-hand side, an urban place would be more of an impacted night sky environment. Still important, particularly if we want our children, who predominantly are more living in urbanized environments, to understand what a night sky is. And you can still, in urban places, you can still do full moon walks, for instance. It's a whole different category. So while dark sky and talking about dark skies is important, I like natural night sky better because sometimes in aurora or in a full moon, the night sky is anything but dark. And that's good. We should tell that story too. And then parks and preserves and sanctuaries. So geospatially, you can think of it as well that urban night sky places would be where people really live in high amounts in cities. Dark sky communities could be suburban or rural transitions. And then parks would be some of our darkest areas. And if you work together in communities to identify the communities within a larger area nearby parks, you could come up with a reserve. And then finally, sanctuaries are pretty much left for our darkest, largest places in the world. So since 2015, I have been working with a lot of different providers. The National Park Service definitely is one of them. But I'm working with them to just help them make decisions. Sometimes, and I'll talk about how I support their decision making. Um, but really, we're trying to make decisions like at Zion, for instance. There's Zion National Park um, in the background here. How can we keep Zion a naturally dark environment in a canyon when you have Springdale, which is a city that wants to develop as well, right at its border? And fortunately, so all these are different partners that I've worked with. The parenthesis numbers are the dark sky places that I've gone through the process. Um, as part of that, there's now almost just over 22,000 square miles in conservation status. That's half of Ohio. My dean wants me to get it up to Ohio by the time I finish doing the work, so we'll see how far it goes. But I worked with 61 partners. Very promising lately. I've been handing off my tools. I don't know how much longer I'll do this, but I want other people to. Dark Sky Oregon is a chapter. I've trained two of their people more, but really the two have taken it forward and been able to replicate everything that I do. So that's promising, and I'd be happy if there are people on this phone call who are interested in using the tools to do more in Ohio or regionally. That would be great. Just send me an email at the end and we can talk about how to do that. So what kind of things do I do? Um, this particular slide talks about night sky quality, and here the equipment is just trying to understand what the night sky looks like. And so if we have Olympic National Park on the top, this is at a campground on the Pacific Ocean. Not a lot of artificial light, not a lot of regional light pollution. You can see the Milky Way very clearly. And it's a full sky image. So it's using a fisheye lens. It's a 360-degree view of the night sky. and it shows what natural darkness looks like. The picture below is Ada. That's my property there. Um, I can see Finley and Lima and Beaver Dam, which is just a collection of, not just, it's really a collection of gas stations, and Ada itself shows up too. So there is a difference between the night sky in Ohio and the night sky in some of our darkest regions on Earth. And what can we do about that is one of the questions about supporting decision making. So if you're interested in having some imagery done or getting some baseline measurements in your area, let me know and we can talk about how to get that done. The Here what we're seeing for units is sky brightness. And so the sky brightness would range from almost, in this image, dark blue to green would be more like what we see here. I can also help by supporting satellite imaging. So back in, I think, I can't quite see the left-hand side there, but I think it's 2022, 23. There was certainly a change that happened in Middlefield, Ohio. We started getting phone calls about certain night sky changes. And if you look, there's a dark red, which is sky brightness of something that happened there. And if we go back, we can see that that's an impact from a greenhouse, right? Greenhouses are something I get calls about fairly frequently. Um, from a policy standpoint, in rural areas, they do bring jobs, but I think from a design standpoint, we can do a better job of not contaminating the night sky so strongly with these with these opportunities. And perhaps what I've done the most work on is just helping federal land managers understand what their lighting is. So doing baseline characterization. So this is an entrance station at Yellowstone. There's a lot of lighting there, and we need to have safe lighting for people driving into the park, and particularly for workers, so they don't get hit by oncoming cars. And understanding what lighting is available is a first step. Analyzing. So I think if you're thinking about your natural lightscape or your artificial lightscape, there's at least one fixture that just annoys you, right? And that might annoy you because it's a glare bomb. It might annoy you because you just know it's old and outdated and just sucking energy if that's really what you're looking at. But we can work with partners to understand what their lighting is first. And then, okay, if you're going to make some changes, all the money you have is all the money you have. So what do you change first? How do you go about changing? And it really comes down to your priorities and what you're looking to achieve. Once I understand what the lighting is, I do a lot of project scoping and cost estimates. So what is it going to cost to replace your lighting? Um, it's been as inexpensive as a few $100s for parks to several million for communities that I've worked with. But how do we move forward, and how do you go from understanding an inventory to being able to um, cost out the projects that you need to do? And then also, how do you design change out? There's a lot of, when I started, there weren't as many commercial possibilities. But today, if I want a amber LED fixture that's fully shielded to use for egress, I have a lot of options, and I can share that list with other people. And that way, if you're working on your own lighting retrofit projects, you'd have sort of what I go to as fixture types. I have companies and vendors that I've worked with, but when I'm working with parks, I'm really telling like this type of fixture is what you need to be thinking rather than sole source provider. What I use is field maps, so it's an ArcGIS tool. It's handheld on my device. As I walk around, I can take a lot of information, but I have a base category. All the information I'm collecting does feed into Dark Sky International's application process for their Dark Sky Places program, but it's also useful from a lighting design and understanding point of view. And so on my inventory, I can talk about what type of fixture something is, what type of lamps inside. This is a fixture that was from Hot Springs National Park, which I did last June, not this past June, but the June before that. And it's an old historical fixture. It's been there since the park's origination. And obviously it's not shielded, right? So what are options for making this lighted environment better? Um, so I can take information about everything as I go, including color temperature, whether something's fully shielded or not, and then I can begin to map it. So if we pull back from the mapping, I can show you a picture of the town. And the town is Hot Springs. It's a really cool national park. It's not Hot Springs in the sense of Yellowstone, but it's Hot Springs in the sense of old-time health and rejuvenation. And so they have all these beautiful restored uh, bathhouses, which are on the left side of this image. And the park actually owns the fixtures that we see here, but the town replicated them all across the town. So oftentimes when I'm working with parks, it spreads beyond the boundary of a park because the local community too wants to follow suit. So with this decision tool, when I'm working with Park Service later, I can say, okay, we're talking about fixture 155. They can pull it up in their office. I can pull it up from mine. I have a picture of the fixture. I have all the characterization of the fixture. And that allows me to provide remote support as they move forward because all these projects aren't quick turnarounds oftentimes. When I begin working with a partner, it's the start of a relationship that in Yellowstone's case lasted almost 10 years now. So from a planning process to execution process, it just takes some time. The good news is because the industry is moving towards more night sky friendly fixtures, eventually light pollution should reduce. So what does some of that implementation look like? Where can we go? This was one of the earlier projects in Yellowstone where we replaced an acorn on the left-hand side with a night sky friendly fixture provided by Philips on the right-hand side. That was right out of the box. So you can see on the left-hand side, there's really no shielding in the upward direction. Light is scattering. This is a place where there's a lot of elk and bison. So being able to see around is important. But how much light do you need became the second series of questions. So once we did the implementation and just used the out of the box features, then we began to say, okay, here's your unshielded acorn. Here's a new fixture. Now the light is directed downward. You can actually see the ground around you. And right out of the box in a naturally dark environment, that's a really, really bright fixture, believe it or not. One of the bases that I manage a lot is how do you manage in really dark environments where even commercial fixtures might be too bright? Well, you go there for dimming, right? And so then you can begin to get the amount of light that's on the surface correct. You can do modeling, but for the most part, all of the fixtures coming out today would have the ability to even do touch button controls from your phone, but really to dim it down and to just get better responsible lighting. So as just a recap of what that looks like, what we want to move towards, and as you're looking at lighting, something that's fully shielded, fully cut off, it's going to send all the lighting downward. This can be recessed lighting in your buildings. It can be pathway lighting that would look like the slide here. And then we want to be careful on our color temperature. Dark Sky International says anything 3000 Kelvin and less. Most most partners I'm working with now are done 2700, depending upon what they're trying to achieve, even 2200 or amber. That's your older, yellower looking features. When we first electrified incandescent lights, they're 2700 Kelvin and below. So if you like that old incandescent glow, you can get there with modern technology. And then turn down the intensity to really get us to where we are. And when it's not in use, we can control it. We could shut it off. So curfews are becoming more important, more discussed because of energy. So what happens after 11 o'clock at night? Well, let's dim it down to 25% of output. You'd still plenty of light. And if you need to, with the touch of a button, for whatever reason, you can bring all that lighting back up in a community. But for the most part, it doesn't have to be on all the time. So that's a basis, right? So there's those fully shielded 3000 Kelvin or less. There's tools out there to support your decision making. I'm happy to share more about them in the future in individual discussions or small group discussions. But I'll leave this slide here with my email on it so you can send me emails and I'll be happy to answer any questions, Tracy, that came in.
Thank you so much, Bryan. I do want to say that Bryan also helped me in Clark County get a light ordinance passed. I think it was his images that really showed how much of the night sky has changed over the last 10 years in my county. So I know that what his work does is so important locally, not even including all the work that he's done all over the country. So I think he's such a great resource for us to have here in Ohio. So I know that we have a lot of folks on today that are part of the park system. Bryan, just to start out with, if somebody's trying to start changing out their lighting at, we'll say, the parks, where would you begin? What would be the first steps for that?
So there is some education involved in understanding what lighting you have, right? And so if there was an effort with a cluster of parks or maybe even at the ODNR level to do a workshop, I'd be happy to begin that process or talk about what that could look like. to get enough people educated in terms of being able to walk up to a fixture and understand, is it compliant with best practices? That might be the dark sky guidelines, but it might be whatever the ODNR decides or your local area has decided to what the quality lighting should look like. Um, there are a lot of good resources online if you didn't want to go that route. So Dark Sky International has a lot of resources to talk about lighting and what it looks like. They have resources to how do you talk to your neighbor about your neighbor's lighting. If you're thinking about it, it's great, but oftentimes you're thinking about it because you've had some sort of negative experience. Um, and then even locally, I'm sure there's resources that folks like Aaron might be familiar with that I'm not aware of for Ohio. But just that the discussion, I'm happy. Sometimes if you're an advocate, you just need one person who's not associated with you to come in and advocate to your organization to get the ball rolling. I've seen that happen again and again, just giving a talk, and all of a sudden there's a lot more momentum. So I'm happy to serve in that role too.
Bryan, can you explain a few words about why it's important to wildlife and
Sure.
just human health and our cultural connection? We have a lot of new people online, and I
Okay.
think that why
Yeah.
connection is important.
Yeah. So on wildlife and ecology, there hasn't been a study I'm aware of yet that shows no impact, right? Um, and I could give 2 hours worth of presentations on this. So I didn't mean to skip anything really important, but essentially the way that all animals, all plants have evolved through their own evolutionary pathways involves this natural cycle of light and dark, right? It tells when to turn on photosynthesis. It tells when our normal patterns of alertness should be. If you're nocturnal or crepuscular, it tells when you should be active and how you should navigate the environment around you. So by having lighting that's not supposed to be on during those naturally dark areas, it does interfere with biology, it interferes with physiology, humans as well. But probably if you've ever camped anywhere at our state parks, if you've ever gone to a comfort station in the middle of the night or approached a lighted facility, you see entrapped insects, right? That's very common. Practically speaking, if you don't want to entrap insects at your own house, go with amber LED bulbs outside. They're not attracted. They don't see in that visual wavelength in the same way humans do. And so it's not an attractant for insects. So if you think about insects and pollinators and predators, there's a complex relationship between lighting and all of them. But there's in every study that's out there, there is an impact on ecology. Has been impacts demonstrated for human health, although it's again, the science behind it is complicated, but it stems from evolution and the fact that we all have circadian cycles, and being exposed to light when we're evolutionary not traditionally exposed does have consequences.
I have another question about cost.
Mhm.
So can you provide cost estimates on dark sky lights with dimming and timers versus traditional acorn lighting?
Sure. Yep. Yeah. If you're going on a project and you have specific traditional acorn lighting versus the new stuff, there's a range of products. Today, the Acorn fixtures and the dark side friendly fixtures are going to be the same cost. It's the same providers. Sternberg is one example that produce. If you're going down Ada's Main Street, that's who our fixtures are from. You can replace them with Acorns, or you can replace them with more dark sky friendly costs for the same cost. Um, there's, if you have to put in new lighting, running conduit's going to be being a cost that you have to think about. There are some dark sky friendly um, solar lighting that's out there that we've had some success with, even in Ohio. But it doesn't change the cost profile if you're doing replacement. If you want specifics, just let's talk a little bit about that, and I can give you, what I've seen. Um, but yeah, I need a little bit more information to call that a one per one change out. But generally, what we see is making that different decision doesn't cost you anymore.
Sure. So when we're talking to parks and government leaders, we can tell them they can make a better choice for the same amount of money, essentially.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Can you also briefly summarize the dark sky place application process? So if a park was looking into maybe becoming a dark sky place, where would they begin?
Sure. If you go to darksky.org or just search Dark Sky Places application process, you should have some resources that you can find. If you can't find them easily within 2 to 5 minutes, send me an email. I can send you the guidelines. But essentially, you need a public commitment. So somewhere in your organization needs to be committed to dark sky quality. You need to have a lighting management plan. So what will the future of your lighting look like? For you, that might be fully shielded fixtures. Maybe you have some historical structures that you need to think about how am I going to light these, and there's some exceptions for historical structures. The next step would be a lighting inventory. You have to know where all your lighting is and what condition it's in, and you have to have a plan to mitigate that lighting. The plan spans 10 years generally, and so you have to be wherever you are to begin with. You have to move to 66% compliance with their guidelines to become a dark sky place. And then within 5 years, you have to change over 90% of your lighting. And then in 10 years, it has to all become dark sky friendly lighting. They do that long span because they understand capital layouts and they understand that eventually, to be honest, within 7 years, even your newest LEDs are probably going to burn out. So thinking about how that's done. The fourth part would be providing the science and education and outreach to tell why dark skies are important. I'll promote Cedar Creek's efforts to do their new nature center. There's going to be some wonderful exhibits opening there that are exhibiting, talking about the night sky and why the sky is important. And then the last piece is the signage that goes along with it. So mostly the tripping step for everyone is the inventory. And that's where, if we're interested in Ohio, that I can help.
Great. The next question is, how can somebody at home access satellite imaging at their location over time? Is there a good website you use? So let's say, what did the area look like in 1985, all the way to 2005 and five to present? What resources
Sure.
do you use?
Yeah, there's a researcher out of, I believe he's in Slovenia named Jurek Star. He runs, and I always have to type this in, but I think if you do light pollution in info.map, we can make that resource, or maybe someone can look it up real quick and post it in the I can't seem to access the chat from here, but if someone can find that resource, it's phenomenal. It's ad based right now, so you have to sort of ignore some of the ads there. But there's a light trends is something that you can do within that website, and you can pull up. There's a drop down legend, and you can look at other observatories for sky quality images that they've done. You can look at different. I think it goes back at least 10 years, but then there's another resource that you can find sort of internal that looks at some of the original satellite imagery, even further back into like the 1950s. So that's a great resource. I'm not sure if anyone's posted it, but I can post it later.
Yeah. Thank you, Liz. She posted it for us in the
Excellent.
chat.
Yep.
Wes also, with Cincinnati Observatory, has also posted light resources. So if you
Okay.
click on that, it's going to show you darksky.org has posted the different types of dark sky approved lighting. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Um, and feel free to shout out some questions if you want. Again, we're working, I know, at several different parks currently in Ohio to possibly get them approved for urban dark sky places. Aaron, do you want to talk about a little bit of what's going on in Cedar Creek right now, what you all are doing there for your lighting?
Sure. An example is our beach shelter house. We had the plan for better lighting, and the contractors came in and put their idea of better lighting, but it wasn't really like dark sky approved. Their idea was different than our idea. But our manager is very much on board and very supportive and understand. And so it was a simple conversation with her. And and so uh, she agreed to turn the lights off completely, and then we'll just turn them on when we need to. And you experienced that at the Meteor Shower Campout. So during that event, we were able to turn them off. And I think that event was really impactful because the public, all of the people turned their tent lights off and their big, where you light up your area around you. And they were able to experience the full moon, and it was just absolutely beautiful. And it was just almost magical, to experience that with that large of a group of people. And I think through social media, I can see just the community is starting to understand and they're supportive and people are excited about it. And then with the Nature Center, we're going to have a room in the Nature Center devoted to the night sky, and it will explain why it's important to wildlife and why it's important to human health and that cultural connection, because we were close to Fort Ancient, and they're going to have their Northern Maximum Moonrise event soon. That's on October 11th. And it's one of the few places in the world that tracks the moonrise, the lunar cycle. And so I think just having events and that public outreach is important, connecting to the community, letting them experience that, getting them outside and experience that natural darkness. And so that they're comfortable and know that it's important. And so I think just a lot of great things are happening and the community is very supportive.
Great. I did want to say out there too, Bryan has put it out there that he'd be willing to help us with lighting changes and his expertise, but he's also willing to, kind of pass the baton on to somebody else that's willing to learn something about what he does. So we are always looking for volunteers to help. And if that's something that you're interested in, definitely reach out to us. Send us an email, send us your info in the chat and we can, take you on board. Bryan is obviously going all over the world sharing his knowledge and his expertise. And so we would love to have somebody else here in Ohio that can, do what he does. And well, I mean, we never do what you do, but, maybe
Fine. Yes, we
learn
want
from
people doing
him,
it. Mhm.
learn from him about what he does and can help change out lighting for parks. So if this is something that you're interested in, again, it's a labor of love and it's, a volunteer effort, but hey, you get to explore the great state of Ohio and see lots of amazing parks. So definitely consider that. If there's and right, right.
I do
Um,
want to say a big thank you to Bryan too. He came down to Cedar Creek and kind of got the ball rolling there, and it has expanded out. And Bryan, you can see the results
Mhm.
of your time spent there. So thank you, and you're making a difference.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Definitely. Big thanks to Bryan. He's making a difference all over the world, which is impressive and notable. And it's something for all of us to strive for here in Ohio. So if anybody else has any other questions, you can put it in the chat. I will go ahead and end our learning series meeting for today. We look forward to another fun meeting maybe in a few months. We are also going to begin our regular meeting for Dark Sky Ohio. So I invite all of you to stay on. You can see what we're up to here in the state of Ohio. But thanks for all of you for attending today and thanks for presenting, Bryan.
Welcome.